One of the other interesting things that happened over the weekend was an interview that Neil Druckmann did. This, I know some people don't like Neil. That's totally fine. What I think you can acknowledge, though, is that Naughty Dog is one of the preeminent developers in the industry. Like, if you're looking for a studio that pushes the boundary, it's Naughty Dog. You don't have to like the writing of their games. You don't have to like any of that. But technologically speaking, they come out swinging when they release anything. Apparently coming out swinging is my phrase of the day. That's all I can use as a reference. So what he said was, in an interview, Neil Druckmann has said that Naughty Dog will not remain the Last of Us studio forever. In the interview, Druckmann said that the studio is working on, quote, multiple single-player projects and that, quote, I promise you, we will not be the Last of Us studio forever. We create experiences that are steeped in story and character, especially relationships. The stories have some sort of philosophical core that everything is going to revolve around and feed into. In an interview in early 2023, Druckmann implied that it might not be the case that the next game is going to be The Last of Us Part 3. He said, just because something is successful, people think there's all this pressure we have to make a sequel. That's not the case. For us, Uncharted was insanely successful. Uncharted 4 was one of our best-selling games, and we're able to put our final brushstroke on that story and say that we're done. We're moving on. On Part 3, he continued, our process is the same thing we did with Part 2, which is if we can come up with a compelling story that has this universal message and statement about love, just like the first and second game did, then we will tell that story. If we can't come up with something, we have a very strong ending with Part 2, and that will be the end. And he's already said that he had an idea pop into his mind for Part 3. But that interview at the end of Grounded 2, the documentary on the making of The Last of Us Part 2, that interview was reportedly, I believe they said early 2023. So if he just in early 2023 came up with the idea of what to do next in the story, that's definitely not what they're working on right now. Rumors from late 22 have already suggested that The Last of Us Part 3 is already in development with the success of the TV series. And of course, multiple single-player titles are in the works at Naughty Dog. It's hard to imagine Part 3 is not in development. But there's a difference between in development and being the next game. And I think that's what people are confusing. They could be working on it. That doesn't mean it's coming out in the next 5 years, right? Like, no, Todd Howard already said they started working on Fallout 5 because they had to take some story ideas from Fallout 5 and tell those to the showrunners of the Fallout TV show so they wouldn't have overlap in plot lines and stuff. Fallout 5 is probably a decade away and they're already working on it. So like whenever I hear a studio's working on something in a leak or something, it's like, okay, that could mean that 3 people are talking ideas, right? It doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. But with that said, Neil followed up, of course. He seems to really be stressing the idea that they are not just the Last of Us studio. That is not like their bread and butter. They don't want it to be their bread and butter forever. They want to try different things. And I really feel, again, no, I don't have any insider info, but I really feel like they are working on something original and different. Yeah, I could use a third game, but I'm okay if they move on. I mean, that's the thing. I honestly think there's a really compelling argument that The Last of Us Part 2 didn't really need to be made. I personally, again, if I was the almighty dictator of gaming, I personally would have preferred if they just left it where it was. I think that they left it on the cliffhangers. We could all fill in the gaps. This is a horrible world. It's probably likely that Ellie and or Joel died in vicious ways at the hands of raiders or infected or whatever else. But we don't need to see that. You know, that's where the difference lies for me. Just because we know that thematically it makes sense, I don't think that necessarily follows that we needed that to be made, right? Like, I don't think we really needed it. If they took the tech of The Last of Us Part 2 and made a new story with original characters, or say they just like completely rewrote it and it's not Ellie, it's not Joel, it's just some random characters you've never seen before, I don't think the story would have hit as hard, but I still think it would have been well received. Most people's problems come from the fact that Joel was involved with it. You know, so just because you can do something doesn't mean that you necessarily should. So if they wanted to leave The Last of Us Part 2 as the end, I'd be okay with it. Just like leaving Uncharted 4. If they want to leave Uncharted 4, totally cool with it. I still think they come out with like a spin-off game from another studio with their daughter as the playable adventurer. I don't know if that would find as much success. Maybe it would, but we probably see something like that. Abby did hit pretty hard. You're right, Leo. Speaking of coming out swinging, am I right? Am I right? So all of that to say, I think Neil, he keeps doing these things where like he'll throw out a little bitty hint, just a little seed, a little nibble here and there, just a little something, implying that their next project is something totally different, exciting, and groundbreaking. I'm hopeful that means they actually are going to try and push the boundary and do something totally different. In my heart, I would kill for a pirate game, but we just have no idea. We have no idea. Like, at least Santa Monica Studio, there's been rumors of like a sci-fi game because they were working on one before God of War 2018, and that of course got canceled. So there's been rumors of what they're working on. With Naughty Dog though, there's no credible rumors as to what they're working on. It's totally locked down. Even with like Rockstar, there's been rumors of their next game after GTA 6 being some sort of medieval game, even rumors of it being a pirate game, because they've hired environmental artists who have put on like their LinkedIn pages specifically that they're making like medieval assets. They're making assets inspired by like Spanish colonial architecture or something like that. And everybody's like, why would you need that in GTA 6? Probably wouldn't. So he's probably doing pre-production for their next game, which has been rumored to have some sort of medieval tie-in, which could be really interesting. I mean, imagine a Rockstar level, like, I don't know if it would be a pirate game or just a medieval game. Damn, dude, I'd lose it. And speaking of stories that are kind of at a good spot, like Red Dead 2, I think is in a good spot. I don't think you need to go back and do more with Red Dead Redemption. The only thing that could be interesting is maybe a spin-off game with Sadie, but even that, I don't think you really need to do that. I think it ended in such a beautiful way, especially with the epilogue. So I'd be okay if they just left it there. But yeah, for Rockstar to come out swinging with a new IP, oh man. Can you imagine? It'd be crazy. So with all of that said, I'm hopeful we see whatever Naughty Dog's working on sometime soon, because again, Naughty Dog pushes the boundary, and it feels like this whole generation, there's been almost no pushing of any boundary. It seems like everything we've gotten is just built to milk audiences for more money. It's been built to play it safe with remakes and remasters. The running meme is that the PS5 is just a remake machine. That's all it does, is it runs backwards compatible games better. So for them to come out with something more cutting edge would be exciting. And like I said, I think next year we get that. I think we get Ghost of Tsushima 2. I think we see whatever Guerrilla's been working on. We see a bunch of stuff like that could actually be much more compelling. So that's my hope. Do you mean just Sony games? I think in general, this console generation has been fairly underwhelming. We've gotten some games and releases that really push the boundary. Phantom Liberty is an example of something that was really impressive. But it feels like a lot of the biggest games are just cross-generational. Like they've not been built for this hardware. They've just been ported to it. And they might run a little bit better here and there, but they like nothing really feels to be a huge leap forward in terms of fidelity or scope and scale, even though that was the promise, was that this generation with the SSDs, with all the stuff they can do with ray tracing, that it was going to be really a big leap for the generation. And it just doesn't feel like that's happened. Unfortunately, even Phantom Liberty. Phantom Liberty was also scalable. And so I believe on console, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I believe that Phantom Liberty was PS5 and Xbox Series X exclusive and was not cross-gen. Because I think, wasn't it the 2.0 update was also exclusive to next gen? So or maybe 2.1, whichever it was. Yeah, it was not cross. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. But it's still scalable. You can play it on like a Steam Deck. Luke unconsciously dunked on Hellblade 2. Who? Yeah, well, the thing with Hellblade 2 is that it is functionally almost identical to the first game, if not inferior in some ways. It just is flashier and more pretty. And so it's like, okay, you made a step, like you stepped one step forward, but then you took 2 steps back, you know? When I want a game that makes big improvements generationally, like I want the game itself to be better, not like, well, we made this one aspect way better. Like you could take a game that was pretty good in the PS4 gen And then if you make a sequel to it, and it's like now it has instantaneous load screens thanks to the PS5, but everything else about it is worse than the first game or just as good. It's like, well, that doesn't feel like a big leap forward, you know? Like that's kind of underwhelming, you know? I don't know, it's just, there's been a lot of that. And maybe it's just that, you know, this generation has just been slower moving also with COVID. That could be part of it. Baldur's Gate 3 is another example of a game that was really pushing the boundary. I don't know, technologically speaking, how limited that game was by hardware, because of course it's only on PS5 and Xbox Series consoles. I don't think it's on last gen. But I know of people that are playing Baldur's Gate 3 on old hardware too, on like old 5-10-year-old PCs and stuff. So it's not the most unheard of thing. He took my thing. Red flag, red flag.
16 times the detail.